Our first, second, and all other impressions of the K24 swapped NC Miata is that it completely changed the car. I was able to go from simply checking pads and fluids and turning multiple laps until an empty gas tank at the track to blowing up multiple transmissions at both Gingerman, Mid-Ohio, and every other track, plus multiple electrical issues, and a car that would rarely ever finish out an entire weekend. So is it shitboxy? Yeah, absolutely. Let's be real here. I thought this was going to go a lot smoother than it had. I was hoping this year would be smoother than 2024 was. And for the most part, honestly, it was. So let's do a quick recap of 2025 season in Gridlife. First event we made it to for the year was Midwest Fest at Gingerman. And there have been some changes I did last minute on the car that didn't serve its purposes all that well. As we've noticed, I now have Willwood big brake kit up front. It is the kit that uses RX-8 rotors. For the price, I was going to probably need a larger master cylinder, and when I talked to a couple of people about the kit, they're like, hey, it bolts in, it feels great, fantastic. I was trying to develop a kit with AP racing calipers, and I was just like, F it, I don't want to do this anymore. I've already done way more than necessary on this car in development. When I put these on, I was pretty excited about it because it was fairly cheap. I was under $900 for calipers, pads, and rotors, and being able to throw on just $25 rotors between events, great. I didn't see a downside with it. Problem was, the stock master cylinder is a wee bit too small for these. And so at Gingerman, it did not feel great. It was kind of squishy no matter how much I bled it. At one point, I was even trying to move the pedal in further to get some better feel. Not a great idea. Abandoned all hope. And I wasn't able to run my sub 140 at Gingerman that weekend. There was also another issue. I have an electric rack. Unlike Mike Bryant, who is running the hydraulic rack, I opted for the RX-8 steering rack. This, in my opinion, actually is fine. It felt great. It is the same rack used in the S2000s. I did have one issue, and that one issue was did not tighten the bolt down for the electrical connection to the fuse panel for it. And so there were points where the like under bumping and stuff like that, it was obvious that it was just shorting out and losing power at the track. Not confidence inspiring when you got shit brakes and power steering issues that I didn't understand until I got home that weekend. So, Gingerman failure. I think I ran, technically I had a time for 10th, but there were timing issues and I didn't contest the time because I'm like, all right, well, if you're not top 5 and you're not sub 140, who gives a shit? Next, I skipped Mid-Ohio. It was just too much to do and I didn't feel like messing around with all the stuff we did. So that we threw out the window. It was also a rain event and I'm glad I didn't take the time to go all the way out there. Road America. Wow, the kind of shit that happened in Road America. Road America was a flop for me, outright. I didn't have VTEC for most of the weekend, and that's on me because what was happening was one of the plugs was unseating from the actual VTEC solenoid, and I thought it was the wiring that I built and it was doing something at the bulkhead. Turns out it was just slightly unclipped and bouncing around. Haltech Rick also helped reprogram the fuel map from scratch, and it worked flawlessly after that. So while there was a loss at Road America for that, it did show a lot of potential once we got VTEC running and all that stuff. But I also ran into a leaky oil line for my dry sump somehow, even though I replaced it brand new. It still also leaked. And then I got to put my ducting to work. And I gotta say, this made a huge, huge difference to duct my radiator out the hood. The amount of downforce and drag reduction it provided here was insane. Night and day difference on how the car handled. It feels extremely balanced now. I do kind of feel like I need to maybe re-engineer the wing I built or maybe put it up a little higher because we tried doing an angle up here to get a little bit more downforce up front and it literally just washed out the wing. So, Autobahn. What a time to be alive as a human being. That was probably the craziest weekend I've had with this car yet. Autobahn probably made me believe in the quantum universe more than anything because, honestly, I cannot explain the barrage of events that happened that weekend. I went into Autobahn thinking, hey, you know what? I just want to have a good time, a problem-free weekend with the car. It'll be great. I just want to lap it. I had done some work on it, taken care of some other issues with it, and it seemed like it was going fine. Great. Show up, to my surprise and everyone else's, I run a time that almost gets me in a podium sprint right away. Did I run into issues after that? I did. Ito Wattsman decided to, throw my time out the window because of... So my wing end plate was about 2 inches too long. And so Ito took issue with that, and he disqualified my time. On top of which, I also ended up having Haltech issues at that point. My onboard map sensor took a shit. Right before that, my S2000 alternator decided to take a shit as well. Between those two issues, I spent all of Saturday trying to diagnose why the car wasn't running anymore. We figured it out. I was able to borrow a Haltech from Stan with a working map sensor, plugged it in, ran my map, ran flawlessly. I spent 3 hours round trip getting an alternator from the nearest AutoZone to get through that rest of that weekend. And at the end of that weekend, I was still able to resecure my time at 1:36.14 something. Unfortunately, Mike Bryant actually beat me by like a tenth or something of a second to get in a podium sprint. Congratulations to him. The guy's a much better driver than I am. But it was phenomenal, and it was shocking to do that. So, it brought my spirits up, and I had a lot of hope in the car, but that was the closest I ever got in this car to having like an extremely good... And then the last race of the year was pit race. What a journey pit race was. Right before I left, the alternator I got from AutoZone took a shit. So I ended up having to drive an hour and a half out of my way to pick up an alternator on the way to pit race, only to have it be dead on arrival as well. Luckily for me, Brad from S2K Takeover had brought an S2000 alternator just for me, thanks to one of the guys at Gridlife. I ended up having problems with all three of the alternators, and it turned out the wiring that I made for the alternator was off by 1 pin for the last 2 years, so I don't even know how that first alternator ran the way it did, but phenomenal for it. Once we got that figured out, the car got back on the road, but I was never able to set a full-on good time. I was really hoping to upset some times there, but that didn't happen. That track gets ridiculously slippery once all the heat goes onto the track and just does not go away. So if you're not setting that time first thing out in the morning, you're not setting it the rest of the day. My crank sensor started dropping out a ton, and we can get into that, but that's also another wiring poo-poo of mine. 2025, what an eventful season. At least I didn't nuke a motor, hit a wall, or blow through 2 transmissions. Overall, the stock NC6B that I sourced for $150 held up all season long. Fantastic. K24 that we put in last year after I nuked it, crashing into a wall, has held up just fine. At this point, the only thing that really came good of this season are my homemade ITBs. And that's going to be a whole video on its own because I've got some big news to share with everyone else. So let's talk about that in the next video.